Hello, welcome to Unmanned Aircraft Systems Safety and Security. This is your first video in a series of lectures about security and safety when operating unmanned systems, especially unmanned aircraft. Let's talk a little bit about the problems that the FAA faces at this time in trying to regulate an industry that has both hobbyists and professional pilots earning money, and the different regulations that appear to both the age categorization. So as a hobbyist, you can fly a 13, but as a professional pilot, you have to be 16. So there are a number of issues and inconsistencies that require more safety. And this is a real problem for the FAA and with the FAA at this particular moment in time. They're doing their best, but it is a new industry and new regulations. So a lot of what we're going to talk about is how do we apply the lessons learned from manned aircraft to unmanned aircraft prior to incidents occurring. So one of the problems that they face is what Jack Welch would have said about the rate of change. If the rate of change outside an organization exceeds the rate of change on the inside, then the end is near. And I think we're in a moment in time in aviation especially where that rate of change outside of what has traditionally been done is moving at such a pace that it's really difficult to imagine what it's going to look like in the future, and imagine what the regulations will be, and imagine what the process will be for maintaining safety in the air. So all of these are things we have to consider, especially early on in the adoption of UAS enterprises or unmanned systems throughout multiple industries and multiple markets. For the FAA, there's a number of challenges. The challenge of change in and of itself will affect what is being done. What happens in the airspace will affect regulations. What occurs, what you do as a pilot will affect what happens to other pilots. So it really takes only a few bad actors to ruin things for everyone. And we know this cliche about the bad apple that spoils the whole basket or the whole bunch. Probably the single most important factor affecting the health and longevity is addressing this change. So when we see this notion of what will aviation look like as drones proliferate, and right now, and there's this perception of the proliferation of unmanned aircraft. But if you think about it, at this particular moment in time, when you drove home or you drove to class last, did you see drones all over the place performing operations for business purposes? And the answer is, at this particular moment in time, probably not. If you see a drone, even at this moment, it's kind of a novelty. Whereas maybe 5 years from now, as you drive, you'll see several drones operating in the airspace, trying to conduct business and do jobs that manned personnel used to do. We have this issue. We have to kind of work forward with it, and we have to kind of figure out how to regulate it. And it's a we problem because we're all kind of in this together. There are three major factors that driving change right now. Knowledge, and think about what you know about UAS systems compared to the kid who is about to open one on their next birthday or the next major holiday like Christmas and just go out there and fly them. We see this a lot. I see bad actions more than I see good actions when I do see drones. I often see them flying in twilight or almost darkness with no proper lighting on them. We see these things, and as educators, if you try to educate someone, they basically get angry, and this is part of the issue right now. There's not enough enforcement of the rules for the people who, in all honesty, probably don't even know what they're doing. So knowledge is an issue that the FAA has to push knowledge out almost. So, they have things like Drone Week every year, just trying to educate the public and the consumer. And it's your job to be a safe professional to help them along the way. The technology is rapidly advancing, and we'll talk about one example in a second. But can technology take the place of safety? Can it take the place of a professional? Can it take the place of the regulation? In other words, can it substitute so people don't operate unmanned aircraft in an inappropriate way? And then the other thing is always competition. And we see that as well in the industry right now. There are several businesses that have risen to prominence, and it's become harder for the single person entity to kind of work in this space. We see a lot of subcontracting type work now, which, for drone pilots rather than employment. And these are things that we know have to change, especially as we see a proliferation of these aircraft in the sky. The FAA has a drone advisory committee, and I recommend everyone go there and kind of take a look at who's on it, take a look at what industries they represent. This is going to tell you something about where the industry is going to go, because who are your representatives and where's the communication process. So that'll tell you about safety as well, and where the regulations are likely to go. So you have to kind of also think about this in terms of your pioneer. What does it mean? So you're going to have to do things that have probably not been done yet in business and industry, especially as you go to work for someone or form your own business. You're going to have to think through things, and you're going to have to kind of persevere at times because it's unclear, because you're entering a new industry as well. If you're prepared and you're ready to go forward, you don't have anything to worry about. But you must prepare, you must professionalize yourself, and you must become the model pilot. And that's a lot about what this course is intended to do for you. Because we know from Part 107 rules that at the end of the day, who is ultimately responsible for the aircraft, for the piloting, for the safety and security? Technically, it's you, the remote pilot in command. So you have to take on this responsibility of command and think about it a great deal. What does it mean? What does it mean to be a professional? So we're going to provide you with some insights, some documents, some procedures, some policies that hopefully you will adopt and will help you with your level of professionalism. So when we get the drone in the air and we're doing our work, which is often remote sensing, we need to kind of think about where we're flying and what is around us. And this sounds kind of obvious, but often isn't done. We might look around at the space where we are, see nothing, and throw the drone in the air. We need to kind of do a situational awareness of what's around. What are the roads? What are the airspace we're in? How close are we to other airspace that may be more frequently traveled by manned aircraft? How do we geofence the unmanned aircraft system within a particular boundary set so that we have a flight area, as the Jarasura would say, a contingency area, and where we would enact emergency procedures to protect the adjacent airspace and to protect any adjacent ground areas as well. So this takes some consideration, takes some planning, takes some pre-thought. Okay, a little bit more we expect, and we want you to be thinking about as a professional pilot than I just opened up before you fly, looks good, let's go. We want you to kind of pre-think through a lot of operational aspects, because if you're doing your planning in advance, your potential of having an incident or an accident after you've done the planning and thought through everything diminishes. And that's all you can really do. There is no 100% risk-free aviation operation. There's always an inherent risk. So what are we going to do to mitigate that? And what procedures and policies will we follow? How do we do that? So one of the things I want you to kind of do as you get into this is at least go to Skyvector.com and look for the two addresses. Look for the Washington campus at 475 Route 57 West in Washington, and then look at the Phillipsburg site where our drone lab sits. And you can get a sense of why we chose to fly in Washington rather than the Phillipsburg airspace by just looking at the Skyvector chart in and of itself. You can see the congestion. There's more people in Phillipsburg. It's more densely populated. The adjacent airspace around us, with Allentown Airport and several other little airports, make it a more frequently traveled kind of in the air location. You'll see more manned aircraft there. You also have the hospital pretty close, so you have the helicopters coming and going. So it doesn't make as much sense to use that location. So everything is planned out, and this is what we want you to develop. How do you plan out where you're going to fly, and why do you choose different locations? Now, understandably, you may have work or jobs that require you to be in a more densely populated area, that require you to be in an area with more manned aircraft around you, and that will require more mitigations and more safety procedures. Because again, the last thing you want to have happen is incidents or accidents that will diminish both your professionalism as a pilot, but also can hurt the industry as it attempts to grow from its infancy as where we are right now. When you're done with Skyvector, another application that is commonly used for Lance or others is called AirMap. You are familiar with it. So look at the locations again. What are they telling you? Are any of these applications giving you an insight into the level of risk? Or is this something you have to calculate on your own? And then open before you fly and plug in those addresses as well. And again, using all three of these various ways of looking at the airspace, what can you tell? What do you know? What does this mean for operations? Now, choose your home. Choose a place of business that you're most likely to be at, and take a look at those airspaces and start to think about what that means. Take a second, pause the video, go onto your computer and look at these various sites and the various airspaces and start to think about, okay, how would I plan a mission? What would I need to mitigate? What would be the potential risk factors of these locations that I've picked? Then pick Washington, D.C., the capital, and take a look at the level of restriction there, which is some of the most restrict for obvious reasons to protect national security that you're going to find in the airspace. And think about what would you need to do to fly there? What kind of permissions would you need to have? How would you go about them? And you start to get a sense of, okay, well, we have some areas with open airspace, like the campus in Washington, and all the way to areas with the most restricted airspace and everything in between. And so you need to start thinking about this as you get into operations. You should always be thinking about, oh, what's the airspace? And even as you're kind of going around not doing things with unmanned systems, think about this, because make it part of your consciousness, and that'll help you with your safety and security aspects later. The other thing that I'd like you to do is to go to 1-800-WXBrief.com and look for any TFRs. Take a pause now. Are there any TFRs in your location right now? Where are the TFRs and why are they there? What is the information that you're getting back from the NOTAMs that can inform you? Because this is something you want to do before every flight. You want to check notice to airmen. You want to check your temporary flight restrictions. You want to check your airspace and so many other things that we'll talk about in this course. And it seems like, again, oh, this is a lot of work. But remember, we want to make this routine. We want to make it repetitive. You want to make it part of your professional profile that you take advantage of safety and security in all of your remote pilot operations. So in order to kind of do what we do here at the college, we're going to take it to the highest level. Our liability is going to be high as a public institution. We are training students, so our risk factors are higher. So it requires us to really think about how do we not only educate you, but educate ourselves. I think one of the things that is often forgot, unlike many disciplines in higher education, in this discipline, the same tests that you're taking, the same thoughts that you're having, the same education you're getting, and staying up is required of your faculty as well. We have to keep our professionalism the same that we're requiring you. So a lot of what we're going to talk about will be best practices. Our friends at Embry-Riddle have helped us with a great number of these thoughts and procedures. So that's what we chose to enact. We want to have the highest level of safety, the highest level of commitment to professionalism that we can, and we want to impart that knowledge to do. So how do we do that? Well, we create values. We say, oh, what are our values? What is it we value? What is it? Is it just safety? What aspects of safety and security do we value? What's the code of conduct we expect of all of our pilots? And there is a code of conduct. You've had to take it and sign off on it, make your pledge to good airmanship practices before we can allow you in the airspace under the guise of the college. Will this mitigate all risks? Absolutely not. But will it assist us in thinking about things and you thinking about your professionalism and what it means to be a remote pilot in national airspace? That's the intention. We need to think about who are the key actors in our operations. It's a number of people, and we'll come back to that. But who is it? Who makes up our system of aviation flight, aviation training? And you're part of that. You're part of our culture here. So we want you to develop aspects of safety culture and to embody them for operations when you're working at Warren Community College. Sterile cockpit procedures. This is something we'll take from manned aviation and we'll talk about. I am safe from your Part 107. Flight operations, defined procedures for how we go about flight operations, from planning the flight, surveying the area, moving all the way through to our checklist before takeoff, and a number of procedures we put in. We also have emergency procedures for expected things that can happen in the unmanned aircraft field, and we have predefined some of them so that to take the thought out of it. If the communication link between the ground control station and the unmanned aircraft system fails, you know what to do. If GPS fails, you know how to act. You know what to do. So these procedures are trained for. We train them. Remember the first flights you ever took at the college? We didn't let you fly with GPS, so you got a sense of what the aircraft would be like, or when that sensor fails at some point, which they always do. That's what we do. We practice from your very first days, the return to home. How do we set that up? How do we make sure that if there is a communication link failure, that is enacted? And then we have to kind of simulate those in some of your live flight procedures. So you'll start to see more and more of that as you enter the upper level classes to get you ready for what can go wrong. Accident reporting. We have processes and procedures that go well beyond what the FAA wants, because we want to know if anything happens. Because remember, we're running about 45 to 50 drones out of the college at any moment. You're flying all kinds of them, then you're passing them on to another student. So it's not the same as your drone and your bag that you keep up with. People will change different things, so we need to be well versed in this. And we also need to know whenever there's an incident. You took classes in CRM, Crew Resource Management, Communication, the FAA's Fundamentals of Instruction, all so you can communicate and work with your crew better. And this is going to be, what does that look like? What do we need to put into place with our own crews? What are the procedures we need to have? We need to keep maintenance records, battery life, flight records. All of this will help us keep the aircraft safe, and it's also good practice and procedures for you to develop for when you have your own fleet of aircraft. And then we will set other restrictions and limitations that go beyond the FAA regulations. The FAA regulates for what it wants to accomplish, but we have the things that we need to do as professional pilots and to set a tone of excellence and professionalism. So that's why we have restrictions and limitations. Everything is about safety. So we do have some safety values. Okay, we want to make sure that we have a confident, trustworthy system based on open communication to promote and develop safety. We want you talking about safety all the time. We want you correcting the instructors. We want you to correct your fellow classmates, but we want you to do it in a respectful way. It's all about being safe. It's not about saying, oh, I know more than you. It's about how can we together be safer? How can we learn from one another? So training, education, and the advancement of safety in the industry, this is basically our mission. This is why this program exists. Sure, you're going to learn how to build a drone. You're going to learn how to communicate. You're going to learn all kinds of things about CRM, ADM. You're going to learn photogrammetry, GIS. That's all part of the program. That's well and good. But at the end of the day, what's this program really about? This is about creating professional, safe pilots to put into the industry that can help economic development. And you cannot do that by acting in unsafe manner. You cannot do that by diminishing the public trust. So this is all very important to what we're trying to accomplish. And we believe that mentorship is important on the learning process. So that's why we kind of integrate students based on where they are. So you may have student helpers kind of helping you with your safety, or being the remote pilot in command, and then you start as a visual observer. This allows them to teach you. It allows you to see good and bad kind of things, because all of us as teachers, we all make mistakes. So being able to develop your own ability to teach someone else will help you learn, and you'll be a mentor at some point. And this is what we want. We want everyone mentoring safety in the air. The maintenance of a fault and blame-free system to minimize human error. This isn't about gotcha, is one of our values. This is about self-improvement, continuous improvement, my development as a pilot, our development as a system-wide safe organization. We want to constantly find things that we could improve upon to become even safer. You want to find things that you can improve upon to become even more professional. Your goal should be to be the most knowledgeable, most professional pilots in the industry. That's what we want you to be thinking about. Because if you do that, then the future for you will be very bright. We want to share information, knowledge, intelligence, wisdom, and resources without reservation. You know, one of the reasons why these videos are up there for anybody to watch is we want to share what we've learned, because we're using other people's videos, and you know that from your courses, to learn in advance. We're going to take things from manned aviation and learn. We need this knowledge, more communication, more understanding, more knowledge for the industry. You know, you're going to start to see, as we move basically from infancy to childhood in kind of a metaphor for this industry, you're going to see people start to retract or hold things close to the vest, not share information. You see this in the industry. It's a mistake. Okay, number one, there's nothing anyone knows out there that everybody else isn't going to know at some point. Sure, you might get a slight competitive advantage for a year or two, but I know people are going to say, oh, well, what we have is proprietary. Yes and no. What you have is a little bit of an advantage. If you know something someone else doesn't know, it's going to be short-lived. You might as well share it from the beginning. You know, that's what we're going to do. Everything we develop, everything we create, we share with you, the students, and frankly, we'll share with any member of the public who asks. We want our employees and our peers reporting safety issues and making contributions. Again, if you see something, say something. This isn't about, again, it's not about gotcha. It's not about, oh, you're going to be in trouble. It's not about, oh, you're a tattletale. This is about, hey, I noticed you were doing this. Did you ever think if you mitigated in this regard, you'd have an even safer mission, a safer operation? That would be that's what we want. We want you talking to one another, not communicating, and then telling us. Not so that the administration or the faculty can say, oh, the student. It's not about that. It's about us realizing, oh, this procedure we're doing, even in our training, could be improved upon, and that's what we want to have accomplish. The foundation of safety lies in the attitudes and beliefs of each individual, so it's collective. We can say we're a safe organization from the top down, but it's really you, the students, the instructors, who from the grassroots will create the culture that we ultimately have, and we want that safety culture developed. I missed the one that says our next day of safe operations is ahead of us, more than our current safety record. So, you know, we can say, all right, we've been at this for 3 years now, and we have an impeccable safety record. Yeah, that doesn't really matter if tomorrow we go out and do something foolish. So it's always tomorrow about safety. It's always getting better. Let's not fall back on that record. One of the things that often scares me when I go to an FAA conference is they talk about their impeccable safety record. Well, I mean, that's a relative kind of concept. We're safer than this country. We're the safest airspace in the world. And that's not a bad thing. But again, think about that Jack Welch quote from the beginning. When the rate of change outside your organization exceeds the rate of change inside, that's when the problems start. So when you're bragging about your past safety record, that's not a bad thing. You should be proud of that. But also remember, we're now integrating massive numbers of unmanned aircraft systems in there. And we can learn a lot from manned aviation, but we're going to have to exceed that. You know from other courses, there are now more unmanned systems in the air than manned systems, or at least more in existence. Whether they're sitting on people's shelves or not, that's another question. We want to know that the protection from harm is each person's responsibility and requires deliberate effort on their part. So you are responsible. I am responsible. We are responsible together for safety values. The continuous analysis and improvement of our safety performance through feedback and communication. So your faculty meet once a year. We go through everything. We go through your curriculum. We say, oh, how do we infuse safety into every one of these courses? How do we infuse proper airmanship principles into everything we're doing? How do we ensure that our safety culture is growing and improving at all times? And that takes analysis. That takes sitting down and thinking about it more than anything else. You're probably starting to realize that, there's a lot of work that goes into flying a 15-minute mission to try to capture aerial data. There's a lot of performance issues that go into it. There's a lot of checklists. There's a lot of things we need to do prior to. In our safety values, we need to report and address even the smallest incident. Look, if we learn from a minor incident, we can prevent a major incident later. The opportunity and belief in learning from human error. I often say this, people learn more from mistakes than they learn from their successes. They try to repeat their successes over and over again, and there is some learning that goes on there without question. But if you can have a failure, bounce back from that, correct it, and make sure it doesn't happen again, you will learn a lot more. And that's part of the policies and the value that we want to have here. We believe in testing and simulation prior to live practical application. All right. And if your first entree with us is UAS 105 or remote pilot operations, and you went out and flew a drone for the first time, you'll pick it up. But if you started in our UAS 103 simulation class and then you did the UAS 105, you went out there pretty prepared. We see this as instructors. We have multiple entrance points. But the more we can simulate our flights, the more we can practice in the simulator, where when we make an error, we hit the reset button and the drone reappears magically for no additional cost. That's going to make you a better pilot. If you are putting on a new payload or a new third-party item onto your drone, even lights itself, you need to test that, simulate it in a safe environment before trying to do or enact missions in a more hazardous kind of situation. You don't want to be testing when it's most important. You want to be testing when everything is the calmest. And that will give you the skill set and the ability to then handle situations that occur. Again, every error is a learning opportunity, and it's an opportunity for us to grow. The quality and competence of the individuals and their motivation to continually develop their knowledge, skills, and abilities. This is not a degree for everyone. This is not a degree where when you're done, you'll stop learning. This is not a degree where you can put it on the shelf and say, oh, even if you have a master's or a doctorate, oh, I'm there, I know everything. You have gone into a profession and a degree where you're going to be constantly learning. You basically have camera systems, computers, aviation, computer processing, all sensors that rely on satellites and all working simultaneously. So it's constantly going to be upgraded and changed, and you have to be a willing participant in that, including sitting through videos like this that go on. The right of any individual to challenge a safety issue to create a safer environment. We want you to say, hey, did you ever think about this? When you did that maneuver, wasn't there a better way to capture that same footage that would have diminished risk? All these things matter. We're a team, and that's important in safety. We're all in this together. We're only as safe as an organization as our least safe individual actor in operations. So we want everybody to get up to that level of safety where it's the most important thing about your missions, even more than any kind of profit or any kind of procedure or client pleasing, if you will. We want safety always the first thing. And we want to make sure that when you hire people or you're working with students or you're working with your instructors and you're the remote pilot in command, that you use crew resource management and aeronautical decision-making in all of your operations. That'll make your operations safer. So this isn't our actual code of conduct, but it gives you an idea. Look, number one, always safety is the number one priority. Seek excellence in your personal airmanship and flight operations. So we want you to excel over and over again. Pick up the sound principles of ADM and use good judgment. All right. Maintain situational awareness and adhere to operating practices. Aspire to be a professional in everything that you do, whether it's your drone operations or your write-ups or your executive summaries or whatever it is you're putting together. Strive for the greatest level of excellence and professionalism in your own. If you do it as a student, that'll go with you through the rest of your life. Act with responsibility, integrity, and courtesy. Remember, you're flying an aircraft. If there's people around or you're, basically buzzing by someone's property, a professional goes over there and explains what they're doing beforehand. They don't wait, have people get all upset, then say, stand over there. When I land the drone, I'll explain what I'm doing. Go in advance, explain what you're doing. Tell people. You're going to get the person from time to time that says, well, I'm not going to let you do that. You know what the laws are. You know what the rules are. You know what you can do. But you can be professional about it as well. It'll bring the public at ease and bring the acceptance of unmanned aircraft operations to the front of our society, rather than having people think, oh, they're looking in my windows or they're doing inappropriate things, or, you're not allowed to fly over my property because I own everything from the ground to the sun. Avoid these kinds of confrontations by the advanced work. I think that's what I'm trying to say here most often is all your preparation is very important. And remember to adhere to all the laws, regulations, and even the industry guidance. Strive for best practices in operations. We talked about the human privacy issue. This is the most important thing to people. And, it makes for safer operations when there aren't people on the ground around you who are worried about their privacy, or, a lot of times they'll contact law enforcement. And law enforcement has become, I've watched since the beginning, them become more and more educated, even when we've educated police officers ourselves, in what operations are. They want to understand, they want to make sure everybody's safe. And so, you can be part of that process as well. Take precautions not to film, image, or encroach on other people's individual privacy. When people are in their yard, they have an expectation of privacy. We can say, well, it's public airspace above their head. I'm legally in my right. Yeah, you're legally in your right, but would you want that done to you? So follow the golden rule a little bit. When you're operating on private land, get an email consent, at least from the landowner and anybody present on the property. So, we go out to farms, we go out to various locales to do operations that help us with what we're doing. And we always get permission. Remember, we even have you sign kind of forms that tell you the risk of even participating as a student. So, the least we can do is tell the people there what we're doing and why we're doing it, and make them comfortable and get their permission. If you're on public lands, post signage indicating aerial photography or imaging is taking place. If people are there and it's reasonable, if there's a small number, get their consent at first. People have children. They don't want their children videotape. It freaks people out. You've seen me in other videos kind of explain, and I said it earlier, you look up in the sky, how many drones do you see? But you drive past somebody's neighborhood and almost everybody's doorbell is a camera now. So, but there's something about that flying vehicle over your head that people aren't there yet with accepting it as a normal thing. In cases, if you do get some kind of images of people, discard, do not distribute, do not publish, do not transfer images that surely show people, in their likeness. Blur their faces out. If they're in your photogrammetry project, you've learned ways to erase them from the image, so you still get what you were after. That's, follow these best practices. Make sure you look at every image. You may capture something that is an invasion of someone's privacy without even realizing it. So look through everything. You want to be a professional. And if you have something that, you wouldn't want of you in existence, destroy it, and don't let it become part of what you do in your operations. Be professional, be ethical, be moral. Record video. The crew reviews the entire video, and if there's anything, so whether it's pictures or it's video, keep in mind that there could be people there. A little bit harder to edit the video than a picture itself. You may have to destroy the entire video, but it's worth it to do the mission again without invading someone's privacy. Always digitize or scan in any kind of consent forms to the lab computer. Again, just so we have a record of it in case anything ever comes out afterwards. We just want to be professional. We want to constantly be mitigating any potential risk. So there's a lot of key actors in your operations at the college, but here's some. There's the chief pilot, who happens to also be myself. Several people will serve as air boss if we have multiple UAS in the air and we're training students in various locations in our training site. Someone has to be in charge of making sure those aircraft stay away from each other. We have a head of training to help make sure our curriculum stays on track and has that role. And then a head of maintenance, take care of the UAS, take care of the batteries, take care of the lab. You'll start as a visual observer. You'll pass multiple tests, and you'll get that status on what we call our 7120 form that we adopted from Embry-Riddle. You'll get various statuses. So after you do time as a visual observer and you've excelled there, and you have your Part 107, you passed your test, you'll get a chance to be remote pilot in command. You started as just a student, okay? You may be a person manipulating the controls under the command of another person to practice that crew relations in your CRM class. Your faculty will be your chief pilot, head of training, head of maintenance, and a number of other faculty. We have an airport partner that we work with, and you know that he teaches a number of the classes as well. We have an air traffic controller who teaches for us, and so that's part of it. So the other actor in any operation, as we've talked about, are the people on the ground if there's any issues. So always obtaining permission before we go somewhere. Another thing we always want you, when you're operating, to remember from manned aviation is this concept of the sterile cockpit. So it means that when you're out there and we're performing group operations, that you do not engage in any activity during the phase of flight that distracts or interferes with the duties necessary for the safe operation. All right, we want to practice the same thing. When you're out there, you're the crew member, you have assigned roles, it becomes essential. We want to have a good time, we want to have fun, but after we make sure we mitigate all risks and have safety. Remember that takeoff and landing is, generally speaking, the most critical time period. But if you're a visual observer and you're not watching the sky, you're not being a good crew member for your remote pilot. So takeoff, landing, and any other phase in which risk is elevated. Transfer of control from the remote pilot to another person manipulating the controls. If we have an approved flight over people that we've mitigated and we have a waiver for, that's that entire time is very critical. If we're near some kind of infrastructure, if we're practicing some kind of inspection or something, think about what that could cost if anything happens. So we basically have a rule that at Warren, any conversation when we're doing live flights, not related to flight training, not related to the operations, we consider that a distraction. So focus, finish the mission, then we can return to our normal activities. Always go through your I am safe. Am I ill? Am I taking any medication? Am I under so much stress and anything going on in my life that I can't be an effective operator? Have I been drinking within the last 8 hours? Have I not been resting? Or am I just basically upset about life? Do I have emotional issues? So remember your I am safe checklist. As we move forward, you'll learn about pre-flight planning, pre-flight inspection, pre-flight weather and environmental considerations, overall pre-flight assessments. You're going to document all these before every flight. You're going to go through and exercise your checklists. And the good news is we're going to provide you with all these in our program, and you're going to be able to keep these as you go forward. Where do we keep all this stuff? Well, we keep it in a program known as Skyward. So we look here at the Skyward application. And we have this with Verizon. So we'll very quickly kind of go into Warren's. So we keep all of our aircraft maintained here, including your personal aircraft. So we have various aircraft. But another thing we have is all of our people that and you'll be put into this system as you progress through this course. You'll get a chance to use the Skyward system. You'll be a pilot. You'll start as a visual observer. You'll move up to remote pilot and command. You may even get to be an air boss at some point. But you'll do all of the roles of the crew. And we want you to have access to all the documentation. So we have a number of documents for you to use. We have our nighttime operations manual and certificate of waiver. We have our legal interpretations by Jonathan Ruprecht of our waivers. So you know this is what the FAA said, but here's your legal requirement. So you have that. You have your certificate of waiver for operations over human beings and your flight manual. You have your pre-flight site survey worksheet. And again, you're going to go through all these because we want them to become repetitive things that you do. There's our insurance certificate. There's our concept of operations for flights over humans. Our flight operations manual, probably the most important, the document you should start with, the FOM. We have our standard operating procedure checklist, pre, during, post-flight, and emergencies. We have our general operations checklists. We have our code of conduct, and each pilot, you'll upload yours into Skyward, so you always have it with you. We have our risk assessment worksheet, otherwise known as our FRAT worksheet, our safety management system, and our master hazard and risk register, which we're constantly updating. All of these documents are constantly updating. We didn't write them all in October of 2020. COVID gave us a great opportunity to move through some of these things and to work through them. So you'll be part of that system. You'll log your flights. You'll go in and get permissions through here. Myself and the other instructors will be able to see when you're flying, see what patterns you're taking. We'll know that. There'll be a record of all that kept constantly. And again, familiarize yourself with all these documents. These are the textbooks for this course. This is what you'll be quizzed on. This is what you'll take tests on around all of these documents. So you need to become familiar with them. And you need to become familiar with them because when you go out and you're a professional pilot, you'll use very similar documents. And if you get to an organization that doesn't have these, then you'll be the one who authors them. And you'll say, this is what it means to be a remote pilot. And this is what needs to be in place to scale up a UAS enterprise at a company. And so you can become the expert and give advice. And again, remember, always do it judiciously and always give your advice in a pleasant way. So in our live flight operations, the remote pilot in command launch, operate, and recover from preset locations. So we know what the mission plan is. We don't just throw it up in the air. Okay, we're planning everything out for what we do. There may be industries where that they have no choice. I can think of police. They can't go out and figure out where they're going to need a UAS in their operation if they're using it for police purposes. So they have to be a little bit riskier in what they do. We don't have to do that. And there are ways to mitigate those risks as well. After your unmanned aircraft is launched, remember to always keep it in a visual line of sight because that's part of Part 107.31. And pick your observation areas so that you have the maximum amount of area that you can see. Conduct using a minimum of a remote pilot in command with a Part 107 certificate. Always use a VO whenever possible. And the more complex, they may even be required. So you got to go through our documents and you got to do your reading because in some of our operations, a visual observer is mandatory. Always ensure the flight is going according to plan. Okay. Your crew may consist of yourself as a remote pilot in command, the person manipulating the controls, and a visual observer. You may have crews. You may have crews with multiple visual. When we fly over humans, we take a minimum of 3 visual observers and the pilot so that we can be in constant knowledge of how the drone is operating from various angles around. Remember that the drone lab is equipped with megaphones and walkie-talkies, and you should use them whenever you're in one of these more complex operations. The visual observer should know, or your number of visual observers should know exactly what your flight plan and your mission is. Where are you going to go? What are you trying to achieve? Where should I expect the drone to be at any given time? Because in addition to looking for manned aircraft and warning you about that, they can also tell you if you're off course. Remember, depth perception when we're flying these, it can be challenging at times. Situational awareness can be challenging. Visual observers can help with all of that. Remember, under normal circumstances, unless it's a predefined flight over person operation, following our concept of operation, following our manual with our UAS equipped with the proper mitigation equipment, we should never be flying over people not directly involved in the operation. And the only people directly involved in the operation are the crew. It's not, people you're videoing. It's not, if you're doing some kind of video of people, they're not part of the crew. You should not be flying over them. You should be gathering it from oblique angles around them. Again, unless it's an intentional operation of flight over people where all the proper mitigations are in place. If you are going to do that, you need to obtain a waiver. Okay, we have a waiver for the FAA for night operations and flights over humans, but that doesn't mean I'm the responsible person on those waivers. It doesn't mean you can just do it. You need to go through our proper procedures of approval within Skyward to conduct such missions. We have requirements, and you need to read the con ops and make yourself very, very aware of how we told the FAA we would do those operations and follow those documents and those procedures exactly. for safety purposes. Obviously, if there's any flight hazards, that's what the VO does. If we lose visual contact, you automatically do your return to home. We build in those fail-safe features on all of our aircraft. We program it in. We geofence everything, and we're going to go through a lot of that in this course as you move forward. We like to follow the JARIS SURA 2.0 guidelines for safe operations. That's how we built a lot of our documents. In addition to working with aviation experts at Embry-Riddle, we used all of these to kind of develop what we're teaching you in this course for safe operations. So you should read that and familiarize yourself with that as well. And again, all of the pre-identified documents need to be secured and approved either by the chief pilot or the air boss. We have a chain of command. It's important. It starts with our board of trustees and goes all the way down to the students and vice versa. And so we follow proper procedures and proper chain of command and proper value system of our safety culture. We have preset emergency procedures for loss of data link communication, loss of GPS, autopilot failure, a loss of engine power, a ground control system failure, or manned aircraft coming into our mission airspace. All of these are when you would enact predefined procedures. Okay, will they always be exactly the same? Situations will dictate what you need to do, but you'll be trained in all these emergency procedures so they become second nature to you, and you should be looking for that training, and you should be thinking about, okay, have I made sure that I'm ready for any of these emergencies? And they're in our checklists as well. Some of your emergency actions will be maintain the control of the aircraft at all times, analyze the situation and take the most appropriate action, land as soon as possible, and depending on the aircraft and the situation, that can vary. Initiate the flight termination procedure as soon as possible. So we basically want to get out of the air, onto the ground, if there's any kind of emergency situation, and we want to do it as safely and proactively as possible. Remember when you're out there that communication is key. I know that some of us, when we're doing something intensely, we like to not communicate. We get focused right in on that. That's bad for unmanned aircraft aviation. We need to be communicating constantly. So remember, communicating with people who aren't qualified, who haven't been trained, is harder. You can have a visual observer who doesn't know much about unmanned aircraft systems, and maybe all they can do is look for a plane for you. But that's, you're going to have more difficulty communicating. That person isn't going to understand the safety culture. They're not going to understand communicating to you is in your best interest as the remote pilot in command. So the more qualified your crew is, the better. Designate each crew member. Let them know what their role is. If you just go out there and say, all right, you guys figure it out. Some of you can be visual observers. One of you is the person manipulating the controls. The others is security. No, you have to define it. You have to command the operation. You have to say, you're this, you're in charge of that, you're next, and make sure you do that. Know what your standard flight crew is going to be. So that's going to vary by the complexity of the mission. We've preset some, but always err on the side of caution. Always have more crew if you possibly can. Verbal communication as part of crew resource management. Constantly talking, explaining what you're doing. I almost, when we're flying, if it's especially in the most complex missions, say I'm going to roll to the left. Now I'm going to pitch forward. I'm going to ascend 30 feet, so that people know. Speak the commands out loud as you're doing them on the ground control station. Remember your responsibilities and your duties as a remote pilot in command and be aware of them. Remember your responsibilities as a visual observer. Okay, there are distinct responsibilities for each of these things. And remember, our ultimate goal is to train you to be an effective pilot, but also to certify you as a trusted operator through AUVSI. So we've been moving through the procedures. so that we can be a training provider. I suspect by the time you're watching this video, that process will have concluded. But this is important. We know what the system is right now. If you're doing it as a hobbyist, then stay under 400 feet. Follow these rules. Only fly in certain areas, and enjoy yourself from the age of 13 on. If you're flying as a remote pilot in command with a Part 107 rating, remote pilot certificate, then you're going to pass a written test at a 70% or better. We want you to pass a lot higher than 70%. But then we want to get into, okay, what are your safety protocols? What are your safety procedures? As much as AUVSI TOP is about your flight ability, it's also about what we've taught you and certified that you know. Safety, crew resource management, aeronautical decision making, fundamentals of instruction, radio frequency interference. All of these things are part of what it means to be a trusted operator and a certified top pilot. It means that you know all these things, you've done well. That's why you can pass our courses here and get a degree, but you have to pass all of your exams and tests at a higher level to become a trusted operator pilot. We need to know that you've been trained, you have the flight ability, and you have the knowledge, and you understand the technology in order for us to certify you through AUVSI, and also to say you're a warrant pilot, because that's what it's about. Being a warrant pilot is about being the safest, most professional operator that you are capable of becoming. I'm Dr. Will Austin. We'll see you in the class.